Yeah, that's the best place, actually.
Yep, got the notice.
Hi again, everyone.
Hi, everybody.
I'd like to introduce my team alphabetically by first names. And when I do say your name, would you put your hand up because no one will know which one you are? Amos White. Put your hand up, Amos. There you are. Is the founder and chief planting officer of 100,000 Trees for Humanity, an urban reforestation tree planting organization whose mission is to achieve cities' climate action plan goals to become carbon net negative by the year 2030. What a huge goal. Amos has served on political campaigns, including California's own Barbara Boxer. And along with all of his social and political activism and achievements, Amos is also a well-known haiku poet. Catherine Beerwith. Can you put your hand up, Catherine? Catherine is a longtime real estate agent, former dental hygienist, local social activist, and change agent who seems to know everyone on the island. Oh, and she was the valedictorian of her very large East Bay High School. Nice going.
Mhm.
Donna Fletcher was the public information officer for AUSD, the Alameda Unified School District, for 12 years. She now works for a nonprofit faith-based organization that funds college student grants. Donna has been a voice for intelligent growth in our city while maintaining the integrity of our incredible architecture and the quality of life for all of its citizens. Jean Kahane, thanks Jean, is a recently retired high school English and drama teacher for AUSD. He is the founder of the Food Bank Players Acting Company, whose main directive is to help fund our local food bank. Jean was also our former poet laureate, and whose hashtag on Instagram is 5TreePoem. I hope I haven't left anything out, and I know I have. This is my team, and all of us are facilitators. We all live on the island. We all have or have had children in our schools. So, my fellow facilitators, we've done most of the heavy lifting in the weeks that we've been getting together, and now it's time to craft those 2 prompt questions that will be our barometer during the event to keep us focused on and on track while we dialogue with our residents. Remember, this is not a mutual admiration society, you guys. I know you will be careful not to talk over one another. You don't need to use the little hand thing. All you need to do is find a space and begin to speak. But I don't want you to worry about stepping on toes. It's important that we get to the questions that we need. So let's get on it. Amos, I see you've got a question already in your thought.
Yeah, for the most part. Well, as usual, it's like, how do we begin? We're trying to frame something here.
Well, I have an idea.
Yep.
What makes a good question? I kind of want to back up to that, although I wouldn't want to back up too far. We won't get anywhere forward. But we have a teacher in our midst, and a very distinguished one, and I think he has thoughts about what makes a good question. Could we start with that, or is that, what do you think?
You willing to take that one on, Gene?
Sure. Yeah. On the spot. Yeah. I think a good question is, or the center of a good question is that it needs to be a catalyst for conversation, multiple answers. I also think, quite honestly, and this is again the perspective of a teacher who wants to get students engaged, it may not be the situation that we're talking about. I oftentimes will ask a question that's provocative.
Mm-hmm.
Because I want them to wake up and say, wait, what did he say? And to push back, which again may not be our purpose. I think that people are going to bring passion to this topic. I may not need that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
I think I'll kick in there and add that either a second type of question, or depending on how much time you have for how many questions you can ask, if short on time and we want to make it both provocative, I tend to structure the questions when I have like salons or whatnot, structure it so that it's also reflective. So getting the person to center themselves within the question, in answering the question. So you're getting first person and getting them to reflect on how they feel about it, and how it impacts them and how they feel about it. That way we're, instead of spending so much time peeling back the onion with so many questions, you pretty much hit the heart of the muse right from the get-go.
You know,
Do you have a question that would do that?
Well, depending on what our topic is, yeah. I mean,
All the
take-
questions I'm thinking are very, very open-ended and could require a lot of input. I like these prompt questions. How can Alameda keep the small town feel while adding 5,300 units? And I like what you said, to get their feelings involved. How does that make you feel? And what would make you feel? Because if we can get to their feelings, then we'll get to what they really want, how they can really
Well,
help. Does that make sense? Not
yeah,
sure it
but-
makes sense.
No, you usually, Rabbi once told me, well, two things. One, there's a little truth in every humor. And two, or that's what the rabbi told me. Something I've thought about and developed from that is actually listening deeply, and you'll see most people answer the question in their question. And you usually take the second part of your phrase and put it at the front, or just drop off your preamble, and that's your answer. And so what we do is we ask the people, how do you feel Alameda should move forward
Exactly.
and looking at its housing to preserve its small town charm, knowing the realities that we have to increase our housing units? And that way it becomes, they are identified, centered, and they have to respond from that point of view, but it points it towards the object issue. And that's how you wrap that one.
This is a hot topic, and I'm thinking of I'm coming from the background of what my beliefs are with this. And my first question is, how can we go to the state and see if we can't lower these numbers? Or something along those lines. Because I don't know that the state is really well aware that we have an island with very little egress. And, somebody willing to help go to the state and see if we can lessen that number.
well, actually, they did do that. There was a time frame for doing that, and we did it, and it was rejected along with every other city that did it. But what I get from what you're saying is, why can't we push back in certain areas? Where do we have discretion?
Right.
Why is it all just, a march
Laid out
order from
before
the
us,
state?
One way or the other.
Yeah, where it's laid out before us and this is what it's going to be. As opposed to getting the community input, which, sounds like it's already done, but, how can Alameda accommodate the traffic flow? And, in a lot of ways, a lot of these things should be done before the housing comes, but we're on this crunch of a deadline to get this to the state that we can't figure out these things ahead of time.
A couple things I do know. And first, to point to exactly what Donna said, which we need to recognize, the public process, most public don't know about it, but it has already occurred. It's been a couple of years or several years of this, but it is poor. It's not poorly. It's just not on our radars because it's not in our wheelhouse to be thinking about housing. And when people start talking the word RENA, it's like, yeah, I'm not going to that one. I don't know what it means. And it's not an issue until it becomes a vote for someone. And then we all have opinions about it, but we've already missed that ship. Right. I think, and it's unfortunate because, without a real public newspaper, so to speak, that everyone can get, we do remain kind of uninformed as a public in general. So these issues are important. The second thing is, I think both your point of view raises really good secondary questions. such as what are the demands the issue is going to raise. And I think those are also important questions that both are attendant issues, but also perhaps are secondary questions to the larger issue, which is going to cause those things to happen. Not to answer the question ourselves, but we did just put in a whole new ferry terminal to serve all those condos they're building out there,
Yeah.
but for the whole island supposedly as well. I don't know how it breaks down, but also to address, just to give you this information, there's long been on the books a plan to bring BART in from Fruitvale, and it's already been scoped out. So where that goes, whether it's back to 12th Street or whether it goes out to Treasure Island, is the plan. Is already been thought out and on the books. The third is another tunnel. So those options are, many of those options have been put on the table, but I think those are all secondary and driven by the first question. How do you feel about that, and how are we going to respond to it?
But I actually,
Or how do you feel about that, and how we're in structuring that question?
right.
Gene, what do you got?
Yeah, if I could take it back a little bit here, what I'm thinking about is, in order to have this conversation, and thanks, Donna, for your identifying me as a classroom teacher. Part of what I like to do also is to maybe offer a rhetorical question to serve as a mirror for all the folks who were involved in the conversation. And part of what I'm thinking about, as we've already started to go into some of the details of this discussion of the topic, is really this kind of rhetorical question of acknowledging that housing is an issue of self-interest in many ways versus community interest. And to have people consider that, because of course, we live where we live. I think among the five of us right now, I don't know exactly, but we are all in our own homes, is what I think. That brings a certain perspective, bias, you might even say. And I think that, again, for a larger discussion of people taking place in a civic setting, acknowledging that people bring different perspectives, and that friction exists, to maybe help them kind of be a little more aware of each other, and the biases that they bring to this topic.
Good point. I think one of the things that I'm hearing is that on the one hand, we have sort of these large things that are going on out there that have to do with transportation, that have to do with, different demographics changing and all that kind of thing. And then we have, 80 folks that we're hoping to have at our community dialogue, all of whom have their own personal things that are important to them. And we want to make sure that we are considering all of the larger entities. But as you point out, Amos, they really, those questions, those answers, if there are answers, kind of come from this original thought more about not so much what's in it for me as what does it mean to me? How will this change my life as a resident of Alameda? It's a very important thing. And we need to know what each other are thinking. Right?
And almost, if I could add to that, I think there's an element of fear.
Yeah.
And that may be too provocative of a word to use, but when you think about, we all, and no pun, we all enjoy homeostasis. We like things, many people, as they are, if it's good for us.
Speak for yourself. You're not an entrepreneur.
I just learned a new word. I just learned a new word.
Yeah, no, but what I mean by that is,
look on the refrigerator for that word, Donna.
I like where I live. I like my neighbors. I like my circumstances and all the settings and all the ambiance in all the micro communities I live in. My block, where I am on my end of Alameda overall, Alameda in relation to the East Bay, and disrupting those things with BART lines coming through, or extra housing, or in my case, they're someday going to build a multi-level animal facility for friends of Alameda Animals behind my house. I like animals. I'm not sure I want them all behind me, at night barking. But But I think
Yeah,
I
I like the idea of the whole self-interest that does bring a different perspective, but not just framing the question, but also in structuring the question. I think the first thing I keep in mind is, who am I asking?
Mhm.
And in front of, who is the audience?
Mhm.
And I consciously focus on asking questions of that one individual or that group of individuals who are going to be answering,
Yeah.
knowing they are answering in front of that specific audience, regardless of where they are, if it's about creating dialogue.
Absolutely. And that's, I
It's got to
think
be relevant.
that's the beauty of a dialogue, is that you
Right.
are working within a segment, and hopefully a very broad segment of our residency, so that we are hearing from the 80,000 by hearing from the 80. That's the hope. And so the questions should be, I think enough open-ended, as you say, Catherine. They're certainly not. They're not designed to have yes or no answers. That's for sure. And even if they were, there would be an awful lot of yeses and an awful lot of nos. So I think, we need to take something here that we've been tossing around and see if we can't put some ink on it. A couple of things that I scratched down were, how can the residents of Alameda be certain that they will have as much opportunity to the added housing elements as those who would come here from elsewhere, people who would come here, move from other places? How would this be good for Alamedans that live here right now? Those are the people that are coming to our dialogue. Those are the people that we want to have talking with one another, and hopefully hearing one another in such a way that they can be politically, socially active for those voices. Donna?
Yeah. Going back to the question of how do you feel about this? I think that is such a brilliant question, because everybody comes with those feelings to the event, whatever the event is, the town hall, the this or the that, Alameda Peeps. And they need to get those, they need to get those feelings out, because I don't think we can have a good dialogue. We need to acknowledge those feelings. So I'm wondering if the very first, but then I don't know how to take them from emotions, because some people will just say, I'm angry, how do you take them from that to get them into our dialogue? But I don't know, it feels like that's kind of where the door opens, is I've got these feelings, and if I don't get them out on the table, it's going to poison, if it's too strong of a word, this dialogue, because it's not going to be
no, it's
productive.
going to be, the dialogue will handle itself. Everybody's going to come with thoughts. They're all going to spread them out. We're going to help keep them focused. So why don't we take the that first little piece there that talks about how did we feel? Do you have that written down, Donna?
Well, I would root it. I wouldn't leave it as open-ended as just how do you feel. I would root it specifically to tie it to something, so that they're focused on. It's kind of like, I thanks for saying it. I didn't think of that, Donna, but you're absolutely right, because most political debates, or when you have town halls, the best thing to do is just pass the mic. And people just, quote, want to be heard. They don't really come to discuss and debate and to learn. They just want to be heard. You're right. They actually bring, it's kind of like a writer. Gene knows this. And so many, Gene and I are both writers, poets. And I don't get it from the way literally 95+% of my colleagues here, who all say, I write because I have to get this out. And it's a true affliction. It's real. But I'm not affected by it, but they are, as writers. They have something they literally have to process.
To get out. Yeah.
And I think when people come, I think that's absolutely correct, Donna, because I noticed it's like, how many meetings get out of control because we haven't let that happen first. And so I think if we could maybe think about, okay, don't just start with an open mic, but how can we, again, let people express, but then let's give it a little bit of guidance on there and root it to something.
And that's
so
where
that
we are.
it's productive, just so that it's
Right.
productive.
Two
So my
prompt
daughter-
questions. That's where we are.
My
Right.
daughter talks about safe places. So it's like if we can create a safe place for people to let those feelings out, that would be incredible, as long as we could move on. Or
But
move
I
on.
want to add a small thing to this. I'm going to go back and put my teacher hat back on.
Mhm.
I've experienced that I recognize the need for public forum for expression. But what I would prefer, and it's through the facilitation, and again, I think the crafting of the questions, is if that experience, if that public forum is equally what you can take from it. I mean, is it a learning environment? Not simply do I go to a public forum,
Mhm.
here's a question, I lay out there my self-interest or my beliefs, but am I able through the conversation to hear other people, to consider other other points of view? Can I come away with it with more than just a feeling of, I went there and told those folks what I feel? Maybe can you walk away with it saying, oh, wow, I learned something. I hadn't
And that'll
considered
be on
That's
our
critical.
shoulders, because as facilitators, we're going to want to readdress things that we hear.
that.
We're
Mhm.
going to want to say, we hear this, we hear you saying this. So it'll be on us to do that. These two prompt questions, and we have talked all the way around them, and we're starting to hone in. These two prompt questions will keep us focused so that we don't have 80 people each telling a single story that means only something to them,
Mhm.
but will be a part of what they're hearing other people saying, and the ideas will become melded, and you'll begin to hear certain things that will be standing out over all other things. So let's see if we can't focus in a little bit on what this question that started off with something like, how do you feel about? Let's see if we can't come up with a very simple and direct question that would help us with the 80 people that we plan to be standing in front of and hearing from. So
Catherine, did you have something percolating?
I'm in my head, I'm thinking I'm going back to the meeting the other night with Andrew Thomas and thinking of what happened there and how in this context, how it could have been better.
Yeah.
And you're exactly right. People weren't heard. He wasn't letting people be heard. And I'm just thinking, in specific to the club property, for example, what are the items that you'd like to see mitigated along the way? That the project's going to happen. How can we make it more palatable for the neighborhood? And I don't know that the project's going to happen, but I'm just saying,
No,
the 5,300
that's a good way
homes,
to yeah,
the
that's a good
53
way to put
homes
it.
are coming.
Yeah.
How can we make it to where it fits in with us versus us fitting in around
Right.
it?
The things we
So-
can control versus the things we can't.
Yes,
Mhm.
yes.
right, but we have the edict of the RENA, which is larger than that particular item that you're talking about. And that focuses it. Let's kick it back out a little bit now. So we
Right.
know there's going to be development coming to Alameda. We know that it's going to mean something to everyone.
Right.
So a question that would help focus the conversation, not so much that we're going to answer in some way, but that it will help to focus the conversation. Starting again with that, how would you feel kind of thing? Because that's really what we're asking all these 80 people. How do you feel about what's going on here? So let's help with a focused question.
Yeah, as we do, I want to give this question to Donna because I was trying to send it to you in chat before I forgot it, but it's not enabled. The second follow on that, because hopefully you'll see the logic and it might help us build a better first question. And Peter, you started to say it. How do you feel about issue and its impact? And then the follow on would be, how can we make this accessible for both accessible? You use the word good, Peter, and I would say, how can we make this, whatever it is, accessible for both Alamedans or Alameda residents and for the people outside who it may attract. And that way, it's asking them kind of to think about other people other than just their own point of view and or worldview. And I think that would be a good follow-on after the mic has gone around, with the first question being reflective on an issue and its impact on a person. But we're going to hear differing perspectives. And I think those are those multiple voices, Gene, that people, they're going to take away with it. How can it be a learning question? Just pass the mic. Why? The answers are out there, not coming from us as facilitators. And if there's enough people just sharing, people are going to have to hear those different perspectives. And once we get to the second question, it's forcing them to reconcile now from what you've heard from both your neighbors, you know, and or thinking about who else may be here. And they now have to comparatively balance whatever they've heard. And we're hoping not that they're going to have some aha or shift in mindset, but at least they've heard those differing opinions first. And we're asking them to project out of their own point of view to consider how it could be whatever the impacting issue is, may impact other people and or could attract them as that benefits either accessibility or Alameda.
Right.
What do you guys think?
Can I give a word for that? And forgive me if it's not the right word, but I've been thinking about this. And it's an old-fashioned word that we don't see very often. It doesn't have any validity in Congress or in most political arenas, and that is compromise. You know, to offer to the group, the 80, okay, what are you willing to compromise with?
Yeah.
What does that look like for you? Do you recognize the value of compromise? You know, how can we reach that middle ground? That thing that, again, we used to pay more attention to, as opposed to a win-lose.
Exactly.
That's excellent.
I've written down a little bit of a question here. I mean, it could apply to anything. What are the items that would help mitigate those feelings after you've asked how do you feel about that? What are the items that would help mitigate those feelings and make it palatable for the majority of our residents?
Wow.
So that you feel good and everybody else feels good, because you're not the only one here. Everybody else has to feel good about this too. We took an offer on a property last night, and we didn't want to push it because we wanted the buyer to feel as good about buying the property as the seller was feeling about selling it. You know, in the end, just what you said, Gene, it's compromise. It's compromise.
It's getting
So,
to yes for both parties.
It is.
It's getting
It
to
is.
yes.
Yep.
Or at least a warm yes. Maybe not a full yes. Like, I'm not thrilled about the club having housing, but maybe if we adjust it a little bit, it'll be palatable.
So here's what we have going on in Alameda right now. The way things work is there's an issue on the table. There's the people that are for it, the people that are against it. Somebody who's got influence rallies the troops, gets them all fired up, uses what I call winning with words to get their thing across, storms City Hall, trying to influence the process, whether it's, in a public forum on, over streaming, or whether it's going behind the scenes and talking to one of the planning board members. Everybody's trying to influence them to their point of view so that they don't get something taken away from them that they're worried about, or something brought in that they don't want. And it's completely dysfunctional. It ends up being, because everybody will tell you, well, if you want to get, blah, 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 then you better get people to write the letters, go to City Hall, speak at the meetings. And so it's this cacophony of.
Right.
Well,
whatever.
and Andrew said specifically the other night, you can't fight City Hall.
Did he say that?
He did.
Wait, did he say that publicly?
He did.
He said that?
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, then
It
let's all
wasn't-
go home.
So I don't want to get into that meeting.
Yeah, no, but that is, that's really bad. That's a signal of
That shuts
dysfunction
people
right
down.
there.
That shuts people
Oh,
down right there.
completely.
True enough.
Completely.
However, in the interest of time,
Yeah.
and realizing as we look at each other and are having this wonderful conversation, how hard it is to focus on getting to a question that is a prompt question. It's not an answerable question by us. This is a question that helps them to focus. We started to touch on it, and we've come nicely around to this. So it starts off with that beckoning question, of how do you feel about? And then it was some level of the things that appear to be happening with our RENA, because it is about RENA, it is about the building. How do you feel about that, and what you think you can live with, accommodate, or
So if I could,
yes.
what I heard coming from the group was 3 different kinds of questions. And then you guys tell me if you heard the same thing. I heard
Okay.
the feeling question that Amos was talking about. I heard the rhetorical question from Jean. I'm not sure what a rhetorical question is, but I liked what he said about, anyway, framing a rhetorical question. I want to get lost. And then what Catherine said about how do we sort of put it all together and have, a spirit of compromise or mitigation or what, to move forward. So, I mean, if we did those 3 things, it seems like we'd be successful.
Mhm.
That's a pretty good summary. You listen well.
Yeah, good job.
Okay, so we now have 3 prompt questions, which is fine. Three's fine.
I mean, are they different?
Well, actually, not really. No, the rhetorical is actually a framework. So it's
Right.
it's the way you pose the question rhetorically, such as,
Pose the question.
What's
Well,
that?
he was talking
Pose the
about
question.
self-interest. He gave an example of self-interest versus community interest.
Right.
You want to
Uh-huh.
elaborate, Jean?
Well, just as, and again, rhetorical simply means a question for which there's no answer. You sort of put out there, in many ways, you pose the question to set the tone, which I think is an important part of the conversation,
Perfect.
especially one that's going to be, that has a potential for such conflict.
Maybe that's the first question.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And then you move to emotions. How do you feel
Mhm.
about it?
So let's have a phrased question that we can actually speak into the mic with. What would that look like?
Well, okay, I'm going to go back to my teacher hat, maybe being a little provocative. Maybe the first question is, are you willing to open your arms to new people coming to this town?
Wow, Gene, you really do go for the provocation right up front.
What do you think about
that's
that
kind
one?
of the issue, right?
What do you
You
think?
know.
What do you think? What do you guys think about that?
Having new people come,
The question.
I think the question's awesome.
Would you
What do you
change it in any way, or do you like it just that way?
Say it again,
No,
Jean.
I would say it's hardball, and it prompts people to want to respond to a hard ball with a hard bat. And I would say,
Mhm.
no, he said, what do you think? And I would say, ask them, oh wow, that's a hard ball.
Jean, can you say
Especially
the
for
question
just,
again? Sorry.
yeah, say it
Amos.
again, Gene. Yeah, no, please.
Are you willing are you willing, and you could even modify it a little bit, to what extent are you willing to open your arms to newcomers?
That's the second part. You said, what do you think about people coming, was your first part of the question, right?
No, it was actually more, are you willing? Because I think that's the key part of it. Are you willing to open your arms? Are you willing to have an open mind? What you're really saying is, are you willing to have an open mind at this conversation right now? Because again, in many ways, the open-mindedness of the conversation right now is what's going to guide what eventually is that decision, how you respond to RENA and make this work.
Donna, did you write that down?
No.
Write it down. That may be our first question.
Yeah,
Unless you want to tweak it.
Okay.
that
This is
that really feels hard to me, and hard meaning you're ripping off the scab, and that's going to hurt a lot.
Yeah.
And people are just going to be reactive. I love it because it does exactly what you say you're trying to do. But I think actually, perhaps that might be a better second question, but I see what you're doing. What you're really trying to get people saying, are you open to be welcoming town like you say you are, Alan?
Yeah.
That's what you're really trying to say.
And to back what you're saying, Amos, in many ways, the way I phrase the question, it's a presumption
completely.
that people are not.
that there's 2 groups.
No,
one
completely.
who are
But I
and
get
one
what
who
you're,
aren't.
but it's what the
But
question
that
is
could
going to
offend
do.
people.
Yeah.
Right? The reaction could be,
Yeah.
what, you don't think I am? You know.
Yeah.
Oh, Jean,
But
that's
I'm
an interesting question, because seriously, in this topic, in this topic, I've sort of course, I'll welcome new people, but in this topic, I'm thinking about the condos that have been built at the base, and I'm like, oh, those are those people.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
mean, so I'm not as welcoming as I initially say that I am.
Sure.
Oh, those are the people that live in the condos, the high rise,
Yeah.
not very nice, not very nice. So that's a good point.
Yeah.
Before a question like that, then I would throw a softball as the rhetorical question to frame so that once that second question hits, it's not going to have such a visceral response, which is what I'm thinking, knowing our city. That's right, practically almost any city. When you look at it, NIMBYism, that's what it's going to do. And I think the rhetorical soft question would be something like, or just even setting the scene. X number of people have been evicted. No, it puts class into it right up front. I would point to the social, what are they called? Stressors and demands. Set the picture either in a short story up front, not story, but, give the context of what's happening. Increased vacancy rates, need for just housing in general. Just set the picture somehow as a softball before going into how do you feel about other people coming here yet? And that way there's a little bit of empathy, a lot of bit of empathy.
A lot of empathy, yeah.
To having educated people in a rhetorical sense, or not rhetorical, but in a preamble, giving them a pretext, if you will, of the situation before they actually just answer, this is what I feel. And that way they can begin to consider, yeah, I understand this is here. I understand that. Then are you open to be welcoming the people? That really is going to that deeper question.
That's
right
going
up
to
front.
the heart of the matter.
Yeah, it's going right to it.
What if you came on with that first question that ties to that as something like, how can the residents of Alameda be certain that they will have as much opportunity with this new housing element as those that are moving to Alameda? And then that other question would be the one that you just had, which is, are you willing? Are you, in other words, one is saying how much,
or what can you do to be open and welcoming to people, or what services and activities do we have, which again is presumptive, Gene. It's more like a push-pull. We're pushing the idea to them, but it's getting people to act on the positive attributes as opposed to only thinking what they don't want and only giving you that visceral knee-jerk response. But not to cut you off, Peter, I was trying to qualify, add that quality to it.
Sure.
What popped in my head just now was another term, which is really what we're talking about, and which is fairness, right? And I'm not sure, again, if you want to begin a conversation with that as a rhetorical question, but getting for everyone to think about, what are their guidelines, or how would they define fairness? I mean, Peter, you broached the question of, again, people on the island versus newcomers or potential newcomers and access to this housing. That really goes to the notion that people understand, little kids understand in the most basic way, when you're sharing a cookie, who gets the bigger piece, which is kind of what this was also all about. What's fair? And can we come to some sense of what's fair? Is 50-50 fair? Or is that not fair when we look at all the factors about economics and diversity and growth and all the things that we also care about?
So we're asking them, excuse me, Don, I'm going to bring you right in. We're asking these people to think about what it is they think the process would look like if it's fair. What does it look like if it's fair to me, fair to others?
Right.
How do we
that's
achieve
different.
Okay,
That's
so-
different. That's different. That's really different.
So here's the thing. We have 5,300 units that we have to identify as feasible locations for housing to the state. Only 15% of those are going to be affordable. And I don't know if you're talking about fairness in terms of affordable.
Yeah.
But so we have 85% market rate housing,
Mm.
it's not matter of fair, it's a matter of, do you have the money?
Of course.
So what's the fairness part is how, this is what just drives me crazy about this whole process is if the state really wanted to meet the housing crisis, they would have provided ways for low income, et cetera, et cetera. And so it's just torturous,
Well, you have to work with what you have.
Okay, so I
If
don't
this is
want
an
to
edict,
sidetrack us, but
if this is an edict, if the state is going to require this, if we cannot do anything but build 5,300 units, they will not all be for sale, by the way. There'll be rental units. There'll be, like you point out, 15% or thereabouts will be less than market value rate. All those things are factors in this. But I think when you get to more the essences rather than into the dollars and cents of it, it's easier to deal with this philosophically. What's fair? How do you see fair? Is fair just what the people that already have a piece of Alameda get? Is fair where, hey, the doors open both ways. Anybody who wants to come here can. If there's a place for them to live, so be it. When you come here, you get services. It isn't just about housing. What do those services look like?
I think the
last
first
question that
go ahead, Peter.
that I had phrased out earlier was how important to your quality of life are things that are not housing, that have to do with schools and parks and open space and transportation and safety and those kinds of things. We obviously do not want to lose any of that quality of life. I don't think anybody would say, sure, let's get rid of about 10 or 15% of the quality of life so we can bring in some more units.
Right.
And so you kind of have to get down to, if this is what is given to us, because we're not going to make the decision as to whether or not we're going to go along with the state of California. We know that's going to happen. And we don't know if we're going to get something better than we have right now. But right now, we've got 5,300 and some odd new housing units coming in. So what does that mean to the people who live here? And the question that I'm hearing now come up is, and how should we be thinking about the way we welcome others?
That's I sort of finished my question. What are the items that would help mitigate those feelings and make it palatable for the majority of our residents and potential newcomers?
I love that. So should we wrap up with some questions here?
Well,
Hold on.
that is a question.
Three words. One, majority. How can you perhaps look at that word, Catherine, and take a look at within your sentence, because it tends to not polarize, but to denote.
Okay, that there's a minority.
Well, both a minority, but who identifies with which, and why should that matter from a power standpoint, as opposed to what's equitable. And then that brings me back to a question that Peter's been using, is the word edict. I think that unfairly biases, even though it may be, unfairly biases people when it's pronounced as an edict. I would say that's the first element of fairness, where the state listened to the entire state and said, here, it's, oh, bloody, not the Moses parable. Who is that? Solomon. In the modus of Solomon, this is what is just, and this is what is fair for all. And therefore, it's not an edict where it's something that's pushed on us, whether we like it or not. It's something that is seen first, that we've all subscribed to in this social contract, that our state says, this is the fairest option. Here's your portion of it. You guys figure out how you're going to get it done. But if we acknowledge that and start there as the first element of fairness, I think that actually helps to change the tone in how people first see what is happening from a historical standpoint and a political historical standpoint, to acknowledge that as the first standard of fairness. And then, yes, now let's get to the question, how will this impact us, to our questions? And I think that really will help us in unpacking these words and unpacking the biases from these words, potential biases that are both triggering but also empowering to some people who think, yeah, we're in the majority on this because we're the victims of this edict or whatever. It's like, so
Good.
yeah,
I like
yeah.
where this is going. So do we have enough in front of us right now to craft a couple of questions that will help to put this in a form that we can stand in front of a mic and say, here's what we'd like you to think about
Or speak to.
or speak to?
I think so.
So let's hear it.
Amos.
I don't think that's our question.
Catherine wrote down a question and you altered it. I like what you did with it. Catherine, you want to restate it again?
I just took out majority. What are the items that would help to mitigate those feelings, which we've already asked about feelings, and make it palatable for our residents, took out majority, and potential newcomers?
Okay,
And then
Palatable, Jane
basically,
said good.
this is going to happen. How can we make it work?
That's true.
I mean,
Yeah,
it's
just
gonna
give it to
happen.
them.
Yeah, how are we gonna make this so that everybody likes so that people are comfortable? And I think your point about welcoming the newcomers, Jean, that's a good one. I didn't even think about that one.
You know, I wonder also if it might be worthwhile to have a question that would empower the participants. Again, going beyond the idea of sharing their particular perspective, but to empower them to find solutions.
Yes,
Is there some way to ask a question or to sort of lay out, again, rhetorically, you know, early on, inviting them to find ways to widen their arms, to be poetic for a moment there, and to accommodate more people and to be more welcoming. To maybe to even ask them to think about and to consider ways that could work. Or that may be too philosophical.
Well, no, it was sort of hands-on. What can you do? Is that part of it?
Yeah,
Mhm.
part of it. Yeah. Or to invite the group, you know, can we think of ways? Because I think again, there's sort of two obstacles here, if I can put this, or maybe two variables is a better term. There's the state edict. There is the friction between the residents and the new residents, you know, and presumably the people at this meeting are going to be the current residents. They're the ones sort of being given, empowered to work through this and find a solution. I guess again, I'm trying to find ways through a question to mitigate conflict.
Mm-hmm. Have them think of the whole. The
And invite,
community,
greater unity.
which was sort of your rhetorical question on community interest, sort of.
Yeah.
Is that something you could build, should build on? Or is that too philosophical?
I'd say, yeah, I'd say if it's rhetorical, it's no need really to build on. It becomes philosophical, I think,
Right.
more, as opposed to just as an intellectual prompt.
Mhm.
Thus, for the sake of rhetoric, yeah, for the sake of discussion.
Mhm.
I think we have it. I think we have them. Even if it's three, whether it's two or three, I think, you know, you can actually just eliminate one. You can eliminate one, and I think it's one of the first two, which are both, you know, kind of, do you want to start with this, and or do you want to start with this? And they're both asking from a reflective point of view of people's feelings on something. And the second one is kind of like a way out. This is the fairest thing. It's coming from the state. How can we make this work? That's as simple as it's put. How can we make this work? How can we make this work? What can you do to help make this work? Is really a question.
It's actually transforming the forum into like an action committee.
exactly.
Yeah.
But a
And then people
positive,
feel
forward-looking
empowered.
question.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, is that our first question?
No, whoa, no.
Well, I mean, Peter, I know you're striving to get something written down, but I don't, and maybe, I don't know if this is what
You'll get it. Go ahead, Donna.
Was really surfaced, you know,
Mhm.
what the questions should be and what makes a good question and what, yeah. And it's just, we may not have the exact words, but I think we're 80% there. And so, I mean,
I think we got it. I think we got it, Donna. I think
yeah,
we got
Let's
it.
hear it. Let's hear it. You're going to walk up to the
Yeah,
mic.
what do we have?
You're
What do
in
we
front
have?
of 80 people and you're going to walk up to the mic and you're going to welcome and say hello. And then you're going to give them something for them to respond to, both in thought and in word and in breakout sessions and so forth. So this is a way of focusing the day. 1, 2, 3 questions. What do you see as
Here's a thought.
opening?
Under this idea of transforming the forum into an action committee,
mhm,
to ask them, in some ways, as you've done with us, Peter, with this conversation, but to ask them, can we come up with 3 guiding principles
Hmm.
that are going to lead us through this conversation? You know,
ooh,
can we come up with 3 things that we that are our goals, or the boundaries even for the conversation?
so we get their input right up front in a productive
Yeah,
way.
exactly. I mean, and often, oftentimes, and this is the thing that school teachers do all the time, and maybe other people do as well. But they talk about establishing norms,
Mhm.
and I'm kind of tired of that particular word, but I like the idea of establishing or creating. It's again this idea of what are the goals for us? You know, what are things? What are the
Mhm.
things we can do, and open it up and give people a chance to say, this is what I think we should work for.
Yeah, Jean, you come with a unique perspective because that's what you had to do every day, rallying the kids.
Right.
Yeah, bringing them into the conversation.
And quite frankly, and this is again, I'll acknowledge my own deficiency on this. Seldom is it a case of having to deal with a, gigantically conflict-rich topic like housing. When we're discussing, how vulnerable was Othello? That's a very different kind of conversation.
Right.
Or what about Juliet? Do we blame
Why don't
her?
we open up with that question instead? So how vulnerable was Othello? Amos, why don't you lead us on that one?
Yeah. Well, okay, I'm going to play Shakespeare for comedy
and
here.
I'll point to the wall. Literally, it's so funny you said that. I've got a poster right here I can show you guys later of from La Scala in Milano. They're closing before they redid the whole La Scala in 1991. They're closing for 4 years. Their closing play was Othello, and we have the actual playbill that was hanging outside of La Scala, which was Otello by Giuseppe Verdi.
Yeah.
So there you go.
So in the essence
Our questions.
In the essence of time, I don't want to keep you guys any longer than is necessary. We're all very busy folks. And remember that the 80 that show up will be bringing themselves from what they do and will spend hours and hours with us. So if we can focus for a moment without as much anecdotal remarks, because we've had lots of rich conversation, but I'd like to see it come to ink here. So come up with something. We can still break it apart if needed, but come up with something that you think is open-ended enough, inclusive enough.
Well, what if, excuse me.
Don't make it broader.
I don't want to
focus.
Never mind. Okay. What if Amos and Jean and Catherine emailed you their questions, because they've all 3 been taking notes, and then that's where we are. We could meet again if we were real and perfect them. But I mean, I think this has been a really rich discussion.
I agree.
I think you got them though, Donna, and that's why I've been trying to kick it back to you. You got 3 questions. I'm serious. You've got it.
Right, but
I was gonna say just read the
scribe.
3 questions, huh?
I didn't really.
Well, Jean's got the opener, and we know how we're going to close it, which is positive and forward-looking. How can we make this work? Is the generic way to put it. Whether we put more qualifiers on it, but how do we make this work is our second question. The first question is more rhetorical and self-reflective, which is pick one out of the hat. I guess we only had 2 of them. Jean or Donna, what did you have written down? Or Catherine, go ahead, because you actually restated it. Catherine, what did you have?
Well, I just have the one, and I was just going to say, I added to it, this is going to happen, haha, you know, you, it's gonna
That's the
happen.
second question. Yeah.
So
So how,
how-
that's just it. How do we?
Yeah. So
Okay.
after you get the feelings, how can we mitigate those feelings to make it palatable for the residents and the newcomers?
So that's the second question. So
Right.
what's our first question? Gene, Donna, what do you guys have? Because Gene, you helped us frame it, and Donna, you were
Feelings.
writing them down. So
Yeah, I didn't do good writing down, but I think that wasn't the first question, the feeling question?
The feelings question, yeah.
Yeah.
And so how do, what would it be? Let's just say right now, how do you feel about the housing changes going on in Alameda right now, or?
no, about the, how do you feel
fairness
about the
component.
mandate that? Yeah.
There
Well,
was
how
a
do you feel?
fairness
Well,
component.
I thought the fairness was we're going to give a pretext first before we ask the first
Yeah, it's too
question.
complicated. The fairness thing is too complicated
Yeah,
to
we
start with.
can't do fair.
Yeah.
How do you feel about the housing mandate from the state for Alameda as it affects Alameda?
I like Peter's initial one that you said, Peter, how can Alameda keep the small town feel?
Mhm.
And there was some more to it.
So
knowing that we have to meet the state's fairness guides in implementing our RENA share of building 5,300 new units by 2050. How can we, what elements of Alameda's small town feel can we, that do you feel should be preserved? Is that what you're looking at?
well, I have two questions that touch on both of those. I don't want to be redundant, but I'll read them again.
Wait, can I get what was the last part of your, that should should what, be
I was
preserved?
trying to bring Peter's, I was trying to take the front part and put it on to what Peter's trying to get, which
Okay.
is, how do you feel, or what parts of Alameda's small town feel
Do you
do
feel
you
should be
think
preserved?
we need to preserve?
Right, so they'll
Okay.
they'll answer with the things that they like, and we kind of know
That's
what they're
important
gonna-
to them. Yeah.
what they're gonna say. I mean, they're gonna say,
Okay, well, that's an important thing.
okay,
Was that trying? I was just trying to reframe
Oh,
your
no,
question.
you, that's, you rephrased
so
it.
you're
That's
asking
good.
them to define
But there-
small town charm. Is that,
So,
Yeah.
is that helpful?
So if you don't mind me saying, there's actually two things going on here. One is the charm, which is sort of an essence thing.
Right,
And one is about the quality of life issues that have to do with, potentially
Traffic.
overburdening traffic, schools, parks, et cetera, et cetera.
so you want to build
So-
that into the question?
Well, I'm just saying, I'm saying that there are a couple of things going on here. It's not just a single thing. It's not just,
Right.
well, I kind of like, bike paths, or I kind of like, the old lanterns or something on the street.
Right.
You don't want to get too far into very specific nuts and bolts kinds of things. So
Is it
much
worthwhile
as-
to ask the group to prioritize
Hmm,
those elements? Because again,
Yeah,
each person's going
yeah.
to bring to them. I mean, you may, again, I'm a bike rider, so I mean, all about, I more bike paths, or more lanterns or whatever it might be. But asking them to come up with a list of priorities.
I think everybody has a feeling of what that is special to them about Alameda. So
Yeah.
I think the idea of just asking them to prioritize it will tell us a lot.
Yeah. And try to, as difficult as it may be, to narrow it down to 5 things, kind of our 5 precepts, or our 5, the Alameda doctrine, or not the doctrine, but those things we care about.
Safety,
It's kind of some kind of an order,
safety, traffic.
I wonder if this is about a list of amenities, or if this is really more an essence kind of a thing.
Mhm.
Freedom and fairness and those kinds of things are really hard to sort of fit into a list of items. I think it's not that I don't think we should consider that, but it does seem to me that we want to have this as, in other words, I don't want somebody to feel like they came here and they sat down And now they've got a piece of paper and they're going to list the items that they'd like to see stay as they're building homes. I
Right.
don't think that seems to me to be an open enough discussion where people are talking about what their real needs are. Some
But
people's
I think
needs,
that the,
some people who live in Alameda right now, many people who live in Alameda right now are not having their needs met,
right,
despite the fact that we may have nice homes as we sit here talking. But there are many people who don't. There are many people who live
Right.
in tents who believe they live in Alameda.
right,
And so there's a lot of different folk living here. I think if we stay with essence a little bit more, I think we can keep conversations that will eventually find their way into the more specific
Right.
things, but they
So
don't
I
begin
think-
with specific things,
right.
listings of things that we want to make sure, by God, that they don't get rid of.
Right.
No.
See, I would argue those two things are either side of the same coin. You know, this is what Alameda is. You know, there is an essence. You know, for me, that essence is created by trees. You know, and I think part of the challenge of the facilitator in asking, or facilitators in asking a question like this about taking priorities, is to take again this very large topic, this very impassioned topic, and to, again, as I keep saying, transform the group from a forum to an action committee by saying, okay, here are all these things that are concerned to us. Actually, back up, and then maybe this is a way of thinking about this. This popped in my head. Maybe an opening question should be, or can be, you know, what are the things we love about this city? Let's start with that. Let's start with giving people a chance to, and maybe even brainstorm. Here are all the wonderful things about Alameda. Then we have this joyous thing, all the hands going up. I love the parks, I love the schools, the coffee shops, I love
I think
whatever
that's
it might
great.
be. You know, people get to be positive about it, and then, you know, okay, can we quantify that? Can we then keep this in mind as we go forward with these more difficult conversations? Because again, going back to the Edith idea, it's going to change. There's going to be some real, you know, substantive changes. There's going to be 5,300. Is that the number?
Yeah.
You know, housing units, they have to go someplace. They have to look, you know, take some shape or form. You know, here's what we love. Here's what we have to do. How can we marry those things together? Or again, you know, keep those things and accommodate this change.
Amos?
I'm good. I think
I mean, because I wrote
It can
down
work.
those things, that safety, schools, traffic, shopping, local, the urban forest, the trees in Alameda. I remember the first time I drove across the High Street Bridge and from Oakland, the very first time, it was probably 50, 55 years ago. And I just came across to this place that had all these trees. Trees.
people are going to say schools, golf course, small shops, beach, you know, thinking really pedantically.
Yeah.
Hang on.
Yeah, people are going to think, you know, at the feet level, on the street level. And those are the things that make those, quote, small town feels. The local ice cream shop, they're thinking, you know,
Right.
things like that for those elements. And mainly schools and neighborhoods, and
Walkable.
walkable. Exactly, Donna.
So, Peter, do you think we need to actually craft 3 questions? Because we have this plethora of wordsmiths here, and I think it could take another 20 minutes. To do that.
That's fine.
I don't know. I don't think I need to do it. I mean, unless.
That's why I think we got it, you guys. It's not, that's just it. Even in poetry, at some point you realize it's not about smithing. It's literally just get it out. Otherwise the poem never is born. And so many poems are left in a drawer, and literally you're like, oh yeah, I was working. And it's like, but you lost the moment, because that poem was written in a zeitgeist, a particular zeitgeist that you were experiencing certain emotions. And so that poem actually is what was elicited by that point in time. So I think literally we got our questions. They don't have to be perfect. Let's just kick out the first one and take our second one. How we get there is, you know.
I'm going to go historical, in fact, and ennoble you, Peter, on this, right? If we are the founding fathers at the convention in Philadelphia and whatever,
and mothers,
having this conversation, eventually Jefferson had to sit down and write the document.
Mhm.
Right.
So what I'm saying is, we've had this conversation with all politeness and affection. Go ahead, Jeff, Thomas, Peter, take the pen
Got it.
and craft it for us. Write the poem.
Okay.
Yeah, because we got to go drinking.
Well, I want to thank
That's,
you all.
that's what they all
This has
did,
been
I'm sure.
delightful.
It
This
has been a great
delightful.
You guys are
exercise.
great thinkers.
Yeah.
Imagine this, 20 times this,
Yeah.
when we've got 80 people in a room
Yeah.
and this kind of thought process.
Been
Well,
there.
A lot
It
better.
doesn't come to easy solutions,
Yeah.
No.
but it does exercise the thought. It helps you to craft in your own thinking.
Yep.
What do we do? What's important to us? What means something to us? What do we want to share?
Major wrench. This is to Gene and Peter. Just because you just said that, Peter, and Gene, you being a teacher, what if we took this as an exercise into the public, instead of asking the public the question, what is more provocative, or Sophos, what's his name? Not Sophocles, Aristotelian.
Socrates.
Socratic. What is more Socratic than to give the public the question, to formulate the questions
Ask them to do the question.
of themselves? No, because
I get it.
learning only happens through the process of inquiry and comparative analysis. And literally, it's like, yeah, I leave this group. It's like, wow, yeah, I'm already, your head's like this right now, because you're actually thinking, and you're thinking to think in order to be contributing.
Yeah.
And so it doesn't matter what the answer is. That unto itself is a process of opening. You don't have to be welcoming, but at least we leave people more critically thinking, engaged, participatorily engaged in considering outside opinions, if you will. And I think that is almost more important than just say, didactically, what do you feel? I feel this and that. And then you have to sit and listen to everybody. I think in an exercise, that would be a second different type of form. And I think I'd really be interested to see what that outcome looks
Wow.
like.
Cool.
Yeah, that's an awesome idea. It will take another 10 hours.
Well, on
Well,
that
and
note,
actually, to add to that, the truth is, and I've been involved in this, when you try to teach kids to engage in a Socratic seminar, it takes a long time. And it's a rethinking of how classrooms work. And to go back to really the forum idea, we're used to a forum where a question is posed, there's a panel of officials on an elevated stage, talking heads, to really take that and to kind of go hippies 70s with you here and make this into discussion groups and breaking off into subgroups and empowering those committees and that type of thing. There's a level of sophistication that it takes to get people to engage in that kind of conversation. That it's hard to do with 80.
Yeah.
So I have a proposal.
Okay.
It's a social proposal. This was so much fun talking to you guys that I think, as a way to say thank you for bringing this group together, we should plan a lunch together at Chabuco, because we could sit outside and eat good food.
Okay. That's good.
Lovely.
No questions asked.
Let's do that. Let's do that next week.
That'd be fun.
Well, as soon as we can get everybody's schedule.
Well, I appreciate you guys so much for spending your quality time here.
Thank you
And
for including me. I feel very flattered to be in this group.
We're delighted to have you.
Likewise.
Every group needs a valedictorian. Come on, Kathy.
There we go.
Yeah. All right, you guys.
Okay, I'm signing
Thank
off
you.
on the recording.
Thanks all so much.